Hello?
And how about a roll call, man?
Here. Hodgkins here.
Richardson here.
More here.
Freilinger here.
Thank you. It's now time for public comment. There will be time to comment both on the Park Meadow subdivision later. It won't be appropriate now. And there'll be time later to comment on the partition and property boundary adjustment. It won't be appropriate to comment on that now. So if you have something else you'd like to comment on, this is the time. I'll just go down the list. So we've got a check mark, yes, next to Jeremy Kind. Jeremy, was your comment other than the two uses?
Partition.
Okay, great. Will you come back to you? Judy first.
That's me, it's Judy and Kurt. As the Park Meadow, the property that borders Fourth and Balm, or Third and Balm, is that Park Meadow, all of it?
The subdivision next to the park.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we're at 400 South Balm, we're at the other end.
Uh-huh.
And the only comment I have is that they raised the lot behind me about 3.5, 4 feet. So when I look through my fence now, I'm looking at 4 feet of dirt back there. And I had talked to someone with the city and the construction people about whether they were gonna put any, some kind of French drain system or something, because it looks like I've got a 4-foot slant running right into my backyard right now, which is lower than the sidewalk. Didn't used to be that way. And it looks like I'm gonna get flooded in the winter time. So that was my question, whether or not it's the appropriate time to talk about it or not. But as far as I know, the city person told me that they had already signed off on it. Construction guys said they don't see a problem with it. I do. It appears that it's going to flood my property. So,
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to talk about it now and then maybe. It's kind of. I really haven't have an answer for him what to do about it. I understand water shouldn't flow off somebody else's property onto yours and.
especially when it never did before. And like I say, looking through my fence, I have a 6-foot fence and I'm looking at 4 feet up. I'm looking at the level of the dirt on the new lot after they built it up. So
Would you state your name and address again, please?
Kurt Lara, Lara, wife Judy, 400 South Balm Street. So it would be facing the back of my property is where the back of that lot is. And it actually is built up for 2 lots. So 410, I think is Jason and Betty, is the house next door. They're built up also.
All right, well, I think one thing we might do is give a chance, when it comes around to Park Meadows, we might give a developer a chance to comment on that. And then you might need to seek other remedies if you're not satisfied. I don't know the plan commission. I mean, we would take that from you because you have a right to make a public comment here and we listen to it. But whether I know what to do with that or not is not in my mind at the moment right now.
Yeah.
But
Well, like I say, if I get flooded out, I mean, we had 50 days of rain last winter, you know, and it's not the same as it used to be back there.
okay,
I used to have a field that was the same height as my property. Now I have a dam.
any other comment, thoughts on this one? Well, do you have anything for me on that?
Well, I think, let's see. Yeah, there we go. I think the thing to do would to ask the applicant and also possibly Jason to comment on that during the public hearing.
Yeah, I see Jason's online with us, so good. Thank you.
Who is Jason? Who is Jason?
He's the
Jason.
city work facilities manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've already been in to complain also.
Good. Well, we'll get his public comment about that and hopefully we'll get some progress.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next we got a yes. Who lives on 405 Home?
405 South Palm,
Oh, okay, that's you.
Mary Gardner.
And what's your first name?
Mary,
Mary, okay. Mary, would you like to speak?
I joined them. I'm across the street. My front door is at their front door across Palm. And having served on a planning commission for the city of St. Helens for a number of years, soon as they started moving soil, I noticed what he was referring to. So I went and walked it, looked at it, photographed it, went to City Hall, found out who to talk to. Have not spoken to that person, but I certainly have grave concerns about stormwater runoff. I also have a grave concern about privacy. Our neighborhood, built in 2014, 2015, the houses are situated such that my house backs onto a garage wall across the fence with no windows. Every house facing Balm on my side of Balm has that privacy element. If we're talking about 4 feet of soil, and then we're putting 1 or 2 story houses on that 4 feet of soil, I just think that's disrespectful. That's my comment.
Okay, this is interesting. Well, was that you?
Yeah. Again, I would suggest if there's any comments with regard to the subdivision, the appropriate time would be to discuss it as part of the hearing. And again, allow the applicant and also Public Works to at least address it. And then we can move from there. I think that would be a fair way of going.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Can I say one thing?
Oh, yes, sure.
Our living room.
Oh, wait a minute, is it about this subject?
Yeah,
I
same
think we're gonna revisit this during the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, you won't miss your chance. Your living room, we'll get back to it. All right, and next here is Eric Kettleton.
Oh, I crossed it out.
Yes, you
Not
did.
part of the public hearing, the second part,
Okay,
part B.
okay.
So we'll deal with it then.
And Jenny, did you want to speak now?
I'll just state a few things. So I'm Jenny Morrison. I'm with the Yamhill Downtown Association and the Yamhill Economic Development Committee that is working to provide input and research and recommendations for the Planning Commission, therefore to go to City Council for what we want to see with the downtown corridor and with the broader plan. And so some of the stuff that we have recommended is now on the agenda for later with the moratorium on things. So I'll hold off on that. And I just wanted to express that with our latest meeting with the Economic Development Committee, we met over the weekend and we're talking more about particular code recommendations that we have, and we're working on a program with this grant process through the Ford Family Foundation and the Community Heart and Soul, which is another organization. And so we're trying to pull together people who are working on this, like our Chief Raven, who's getting grant applications in, and things that our Downtown Association is working on, Economic Development Committee is working on. So we're pulling things together and we're trying to ultimately put together a format to get great community input that is a structure that could work towards getting an analysis and a plan and recommendations for moving forward. So I'll have more to say, then we'll get to the next.
Great, thank you. I don't see our city attorney on the Zoom call.
He's online, he's
Online.
not
Okay,
promoted to
good.
panelist. Do you want me to put him on that as panelist?
I just wanted to, before we got into the hearing, if he was supposed to be here for that, I wanted to make sure he was here. So, no, I just say,
Okay.
that's fine.
I am here.
Okay, great, thank you.
I heard a voice.
On high. All right, let's move on then. Unless there's anyone else that didn't get a chance to sign, who didn't know about signing up. Okay. Public hearing, this Park Meadows subdivision reapplication and final plat determination. There's some things I need to read because of this public hearing, and so here goes. The application number on the agenda, SDV FP 23-1. The criteria must be satisfied for approval of this action are listed in the city staff report. Public testimony must be directed to those criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the testifier believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of this hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony. The commission will decide whether the hearing will be continued to another date or whether the record will be left open for at least 7 days. Testifying instructions. The chairman, if you are testifying, please state your name, residence, address, and full mailing address. If you wish to be notified of a continuance, appeal, or other action on this application, please print your name and complete mailing address on the form at the back of the room. The name of the applicant is the Jake Lacey Real Estate and Development Incorporated. And again, the type of application requested is the subdivision reapplication and final plat determination. Does anyone challenge the Planning Commission jurisdiction to hear this application? If any member has a personal bias or conflict of interest, they shall declare it now, member of the Planning Commission. If any member of the commission has made a site visit, they shall state their impressions or observations. All right, well, would you please go ahead with your city staff report?
Unmute. There we go. Good evening, everyone. You've pretty much outlined the case that this is the reapplication for the Park Meadows subdivision. Before I begin, I'd like to apologize to the applicant, Jake Lucy. It was my error to put Steve Ryman's name on there. It doesn't change the fact we're looking at the same property, same location, same everything else. So again, my error. Cut and paste does have its downsides. This is a reapplication for the Park Meadows subdivision. The prior applicant received city council approval to subdivide the 12.7 acre parcel to create 57 single family lots. This is known as Park Meadows. The lots would range in size from about 6,100 to 8,200 square feet in area. The council approved this application on March 9th, 2022, with the decision becoming final on or about April 1 of 2022. Condition D of the council order required the applicant to record the final plat within 1 year of the final date of approval. This is also consistent with requirements in section 11.080.030. Further, based on the section failure to record the plat within 1 year, basically results in the decision expiring. We did not receive a final plat on this particular project until October of this year. because that was well beyond the deadline by about 6 months. The decision for approval lapsed and the applicant was required to submit a new application. I must note that most, if not all, the required improvements are in place. In effect, the subdivision is in compliance, except for the new subdivision approval and recording of the final plat. And again, as before, the Planning Commission hearing reviews the new subdivision application. This is a very unusual application that the commission is reviewing both the subdivision and considering whether the applicant can record the final plat of the same subdivision. However, given the level of improvements, it appears appropriate to consider both in one hearing instead of holding 2 separate hearings. Staff also noted a decision can be adequately conditioned to ensure the applicant cannot record the plat until all approvals are obtained. Now, with regard to the subdivision, in the March 9 decision, the council established findings indicating the layout and improvements could comply with all decision criteria. The new application is a carbon copy of the original, creates the same 57 lots with the same street layout and lot dimensions. Staff included a copy of the council order from March 9th approving the original subdivision. Instead of reviewing the entire project, I simply like to enter that order into the record, knowing again, we're looking at the exact same application and the findings in the order still remain applicable. The fact that the subdivision improvements are nearly completed clearly shows the subdivision can and certainly did comply with the conditions of approval. Additional findings I don't think are required at this point. Now, with regard to the final plat, section 1108.080A outlines the steps for the final plat approval. The city engineer determines the final plat conforms fully with applicable regulations and standards. City engineer shall advise the commission, and if the commission finds the plat to be in compliance with the preliminary plat and applicable regulations and standards, they will direct the chair to sign the document. Now, in this case, the engineer submitted a letter identifying the current level of improvements. These include, new public roadways and utilities throughout, frontage improvements along East 3rd Street, approximately 1,200 lineal feet of off-site water main to Highway 240, approximately 1,000 lineal feet of off-site sewer main replacement from the subject property. In effect, the applicant has built out the subdivision. All that remains is final acceptance of the improvements, completion of the system development charge credit agreement for work conducted by the applicant, and construction and fee in lieu of payment for the water treatment plant intake improvements. Once the applicant completes these steps and obtains required signature, then the applicant may record the plat. It is city staff's recommendation that or in this case, the subdivision does comply with the approval criteria. Again, we're looking at the exact same layout and also level of improvements, and also recommends that the Planning Commission approve the final plat as they have effectively done most of the work. What remains are items that can be checked off by the city engineer as being complete. And once that's city engineer would sign the plat, then the Planning Commission chair can sign it. So again, it's our recommendation that both the subdivision and final plat be approved by the Planning Commission, subject to the conditions noted in the staff report. Excuse me.
Well, you're done with your report?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, so commission questions to staff. Do you have any questions for Walt or other staff? Um, So, Walt, there's two pieces to this.
Mm-hmm.
The subdivision reapplication and the final plat determination. Would you see us approving those on separate votes or in one vote? Or can we choose to split it up in case there, or maybe you would pass one before you pass the other?
That would be fine. I see no reason that you can't just do it in one sort of felled swoop. But if you feel comfortable, a little more comfortable, approve the subdivision subject to the conditions in the original decision, and then approve the final plat subject to the conditions noted in the staff report. And that'll be fine. But again, I wrote the conditions up that you could approve both simultaneously.
Okay, maybe we'll see what comes up. Could you explain to us what the final plat means and why that's different than what was applied for in the subdivision itself?
That is a preliminary plat. That just gives you a snapshot, if you will, of what the applicant intends to do with regard to development of the property. A final plat is actually the document that will eventually be recorded in the county clerk's office. This is the official document on Mylar after all the signatures that legally establishes the subdivision. And therefore, once that's done, then building on the individual lots may commence. So by our code, the final plat has to return to the planning commission, since you are the basically decision maker on this request. And it was originally approved by the city, but the commission has the role of looking at the final plat.
So the subdivision application was approved by the city,
Yes,
and that plat was the preliminary.
that is correct, sir.
So if the plat was not approved at that time, help me understand that.
Actually, the preliminary plat was approved. City council approved the application. What is now coming back to you is the document that will be recorded in the county clerk's assessor surveyor's office. This is the official document, if you will.
Okay.
It's
So
certainly the difference between a sales agreement and actually getting the title to the car. This is the real part of it.
So perhaps the commission's only concern, correct me if I'm wrong, would be that this final plat matches the preliminary plat.
Correct. And when I received a copy of the document, I literally went through all 57 lots, and all 57 lots match up to the original approval. The street widths, everything matched up. So again, it is a carbon copy of what was approved by the city council.
Would the plat map have on it elevations like has come to light earlier with concerns about height and water and things like that?
No, that would be part of the engineering plans that were submitted. If you recall, the recommendations by staff were that they would need to submit engineering plans for approval before they could begin construction. So those plans were reviewed by the city engineer, and that gave them, if you will, the green light to begin turning soil and installing necessary facilities and improving the streets. So there was an engineering step, and then you get into the actual construction step. Now that the construction is done, they're requesting approval to record the plat for the subdivision.
Okay, so those lots were created as per the application that was approved by the city engineer, AKS.
That is correct. In other words, let me make sure you understand that those lots were approved by the city. The engineering plans mirror the approval by the city, and the final plat mirrors the approval by the city. So once the city council approved the layout and approved the application, at that point, it was up to the applicant to, if you will, marshal forces to do the engineering and construction work.
So the city council did not probably look at enough detail so that the councilors that voted knew that this elevation would be 4 feet high and which way the water was gonna flow. They trusted the engineer to hand them something that they wouldn't have to be that smart about.
Well, look at it this way, I'm not sure that, you know, people have different levels of experience and expertise. So you can get close, but we do rely on the professional staffing to go ahead and make sure things work out. Again, I think it might be something that the applicant can discuss. And also maybe Public Works can sort of make a comment. Until though they get the final check off, nothing is really completed. So I'm really hesitant to say whether or not well, let's look at it this way. City council probably did not look at all the engineering plans, and I don't recall engineering plans being submitted to the planning commission. We knew where the layout was going to be. Basically, the property was going to be laid out in a certain way and where all the pipes were going to go, but the final details really come down to a civil engineer doing that work, and that is not submitted until after a decision is made to approve.
Okay, I think I understand the situation. Let me look at what you have here. So this is what, Sue? Gently sloping east to west, north to south, next slope. Average slope. Can you explain what you mean? Maybe these are
You're saying it's 4 foot higher here, and it's supposed to be sloping from east to west,
I have pictures too.
Yeah.
and that 4 feet is not gently. I'm just saying.
Okay, this is something to bring up. Maybe, I think we need the developers to kind of, maybe they've got an idea, maybe Jason has something that he's been already thinking about this. So this is good. Let's move on. Not that we're leaving it behind. All right. Any more questions for staff? All right, correspondence. Angie, was there any correspondence?
I did not receive any correspondence.
Okay. Now it's time for the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Mark Hoyt, Sherman, Johnny and Hoyt here on behalf of Jacobs Real Estate Development. Want to reiterate what some of the staff comments were regarding this application. Then I want to talk about some of your questions because they're very good ones. Hopefully we have some answers for you, and I know we have some concerned neighbors. And anytime building takes place next to your property, it's normal to be concerned. We understand your concerns, and hopefully we can address them for you here. And if not, we're certainly happy to have more conversations about that too. So exact same project, exact same plan. Once the plan was designed and done, all the engineering was done, and the city entered into a development contract with the developer to construct the public improvements. Public improvements are all done. The final walkthrough's been done, the punch list is done, the subdivision is at this point pretty much completely built out to plans, and the city engineers here and comment on that for you. What was discovered is that even before the development contract was executed with the city, the subdivision approval had expired until 1 year had passed. So we're back here bringing the same application with the same layout to you. And there's two processes I want to talk about. One is the plat process, which Chairman Moore, some of your questions addressed, and then also the design process involved in subdivision construction. When the subdivision application is submitted, generally the engineering is not complete. There's what's called a preliminary plat, which shows here's the intended layout of the project. That is preliminary because final engineering has not been done. You don't know what you're going to discover when you get on site. There might be issues you have to address. You might have to adjust something here, adjust something there. So before a final plat can be recorded, there's a process where the plat comes back for the commission or a different party depending on the code, reviews that plat and says, okay, is what you're bringing us here at the end substantially similar to what we approved? And that's the question of, does the plat match? And so the question is, was the original plat approved? The answer is yes, it was. And the city council found that all of the required standards were met. And as staff has indicated for you, the current plat matches identically the plat that was submitted. So in this instance, the two plats are identical, but there's a check, there's a gatekeeping mechanism by which the planners that approve this, so the commission that approved it, gets a chance to look at that final plat. So that's what we're back here for, is that gatekeeping piece to make sure that the final plat matches the preliminary plat, and as you heard, it does. And so that's one of the decisions you have to make tonight. The second decision is to whether you're going to renew the approval. You've heard from staff, it's the same application with the same criteria. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that all of the public improvements associated with the project are now built, which includes substantial off-site improvements that have aided in the city's sewer system, preventing infiltration of the Teltzer water processing plant, and off-site water improvements that are in place as well. You heard some concerns regarding grading. I had a chance to talk with the project engineer who's here. Before this project was done, the Park Meadows property actually sloped toward their property, gently, but did. So if there was enough water that didn't absorb into the soil, and most water in Oregon does, it would have run towards their property. That wouldn't fit with the design of the subdivision, and the intention was, the city engineer worked on this, was to move the water actually away from their property. And so the reason that that elevation was increased was to change the flows from towards their property to away from their property. So the bulk of the land now slopes away from their land. There is the elevation, the 3 or 4 feet, but it's only that narrow bit of soil that achieves that grade that drains towards their property. So the actual amount of land draining towards their property has been significantly reduced. And the on-site stormwater systems are there to capture them. When you design a subdivision, that's the other part I want to talk about in terms of processes. Once you have the preliminary plat approved, then the engineers go to work. And the private engineer hired by the developer designs a system to meet the city's standard. And the city has certain design standards that require you to capture so much stormwater. You can't just discharge it anywhere. You have to capture it. You have to manage it. You have to demonstrate that the city's system can accept it and handle it. And you have to provide all of that information with all those designs in place to the city engineer, who then reviews those, and we pay for it. The city engineer reviews that to say, hey, yes, you've met all the design standards. Now here are your permits, you can go build. So the level of detail of design that would show elevation changes is never present in a preliminary subdivision plan. It's just not part of the process because you don't expend all of that time and energy until you have the approval with which to do it. That process generally never goes in front of a planning commission or a city council. It's handled by the professional engineers who have the skill and expertise to know what the standards are, how to meet those standards, how they should be applied, and whether or not those standards are complied with in the design. And what you'll see, and what you see in this instance, is that there were conditions imposed that said you have to build the subdivision in compliance with our city standards. And that process then is checked by your city staff, who requires that the plans that come in meet those standards. So those conditions are imposed by the decision makers, but those decision makers don't necessarily have the detailed expertise to address that. So that's the process, and that's exactly the process that took place here. So the project was designed to actually move water away from their property, and I'm sure it looks a little scary when you look out and you see a slope coming out to you. But the good news is on the other side of that slope, it then goes away. So when the water comes down, only thing that's heading towards you is the stuff on the back side of that. Everything else is sloping away, and that's what's captured by the stormwater system and carried away.
5% of the lot.
Wait, hold on, sir. I don't want to open up to comments like this, otherwise it gets a little complicated.
Yeah.
We're gonna settle, we're gonna get to you, okay?
No, and I appreciate the comment, I understand it. There is a portion that does slope towards your property. No one's here to deny that. But what happens, the entire project now, instead of sloping towards your property, slopes away from your property. And the storm sewers, or the storm water design meets the city's code standards. We know that with more detail in this application than almost any other that you'll ever see. Why? Because generally when that is done, it is done as part of just the design phase on paper, where people look at calculations and they look at it. In this instance, not only was the design approved, but the improvements have been put in place, reviewed and approved. So you have not only the design piece, but the improvement piece, and those improvement information includes documenting the slopes of where the water's gonna flow and where it's gonna go. So we know that the reversal of the flow away from their property was part of the design and the construction. And that was reviewed and approved by the city engineer. So we know not only was the design there to deal with that issue, but the actual execution took place and was approved by the city so that the property has been protected. We can't legally, and I can tell you this part, this is within my expertise, we can't channel more water onto their property than was there before they built that. If we do, we've got a really big problem. We don't like big problems. That's a bad thing. Well, I like them because I make money on them. My clients don't, so they try to make sure that we don't do those. But the design is such that we can't design it in a way that more water is going to go to their property. That's against Oregon law. It's against the city's design standards. It's there. Are there privacy concerns? I'm sure there are. I understand those. We can't change that. And that's something that landscaping can address, curtains, facilities, but you just, property gets built on. When property gets built on, you end up with neighbors. No one wants to be looking in somebody else's window. We've seen too many of those homes built in Portland. I call them Grey Poupon houses, where you feel like you pass the mustard from one house to the other out the windows. That's not a saleable product. It makes sense to address those things in the design phase. There's a certain market pressure to make sure that you don't have those issues. We certainly understand the concerns, but when you own property next to property that's being developed, your neighbors are going to change. It's an unfortunate reality. And we know that this particular project meets the code provisions because the city council's approved it once. We have those findings here, they're part of that order. Happy to address any questions, but we're here bringing you what was previously approved, and now it's been built out and approved by the city. And as part of that process, the elevation concerns that we hear that are legitimate and we understand were addressed. And the privacy concerns, we certainly understand. There's just unfortunately nothing we can really directly do about that. There's setback requirements that are met. That's part of that privacy that's built into your code. We meet those. There are lot coverage requirements that limit the size of homes on lots. Again, those things are met or will have to be met as part of the building process. So there are protections for the privacy. But there's just no way we can actually just prevent the fact that where you didn't have a neighbor, now you will.
I appreciate you asked if you want to take questions
Please.
right now. As far as the procedures go, the questions from the commission questions come at the end of all the testimony. But I think we'll let people from the audience ask questions now if they'd like to.
So in regards to the privacy issue, before you guys started anything back there, I had a path, a trail that ran along the back of my fence. People used it all the time. I had a 6-foot fence. I have a 6-foot fence that I built there on my part. Now, when you stand on that raised grade, I had, looking into my backyard, I have basically a 2.5-foot tall fence, and you're standing right there. If I'm looking at you from my backyard, I'm looking at the top of your pants, your whole body, and you're looking straight into my yard. So will it be something that you guys will take care of on that side of the fence, that you will make a 6-foot fence on that piece of property? So now effectively I have basically a 12-foot fence blocking that view.
We can.
But I mean, are you gonna take care of something back there to give me
Well, so in
privacy that I'm losing with that 4-foot?
in some respects, you've explained one of the best protections you're gonna have. There was a path there. That path is no longer there. And the path was people going by on a semi-regular basis. That's the nature of the path. Those paths are now.
The nature of
gone.
the path was that everybody that walked by wasn't 6'5" and looking over my fence.
I understand. And the difference is gonna be there aren't gonna be people walking by. And we don't know how people are gonna landscape their properties. And we don't know what is gonna happen there. But I don't think your city code allows us to build a 12-foot.
I mean, my concern also was, okay, and I have pictures, but the angle of the 4-foot grade is approximately 30%, let's say. So At the time when I called in, they were knocking dirt clods over it. It was all down hitting my fence. I asked them to clean it up. They did. So,
Thank you.
but what you guys backfilled with and pounded down was basically clay soil. So there's an issue that clay soil somehow is gonna give way and end up on my fence again.
If that happens, that's a problem. for us.
Which I was thinking, maybe there should be an actual, because there was other places on the 57 lots where you put brick block walls.
Retainer.
Retaining
Elevation.
walls. And I thought that a retaining wall would have been the best way to hold that 4 feet of dirt up.
The design, as it was done and approved by the city, did not call for or require that.
And I can speak to that retaining wall that's in place.
So, and there's reasons for that retaining wall, and we don't want to get into. design.
I understand. I'm just talking about
So if,
my spot.
yeah, I understand, and this is, it is your backyard, literally, and if you don't want this in your backyard, I understand that.
Well, I'm not even
We
saying
have
that.
criteria that we have to meet, and we've met those, but I want to talk to your specific issue, because I know it's important to you, and we want to be good neighbors. And rest, if dirt runs from this project onto your property, or even up against your fence, that's a trespass. I can tell you that here, I'm not admitting anything that's not the reality of the law. So we can't allow that to happen without cleaning it up and preventing it from happening again, and doing our best to limit it. Because if we do, we're causing you an interference with your rights of your property. And
As
it's up
long
to
as it's
us-
taken care of
It's up to us
legally.
to keep that on our property. Yeah. And we recognize that obligation, and I was glad to hear that during construction, dirt rolls. And I think we've all
I
seen
mean,
that.
watching the rain that we've had so far and looking over my fence at the
We had record rains in the beginning of November.
at the level of my ground. I haven't seen anything that appears that it's gonna come through my fence and into my backyard. I'm just saying that my backyard is already lower than the existing sidewalks that were on Third by about 1.5 feet or a foot at least. And there is a possibility that somehow storm runoff could come under my fence and into my property,
There is always a possibility, yes.
like 50 days of rain less.
Well, we also had 3 of the heaviest days of rain in the history of November at the beginning of this month, and you didn't experience that problem. And just may I finish? And part of what you're highlighting is that your property is lower. That's the reason for that filling. Because your property is low, and so the flows on the site were reversed to take water away from your property. I understand that there's a fairly narrow band that could drain to your property, but it's a fairly narrow band. Everything else is draining away, and all that water is captured and carried away, so water that would have previously potentially flowed to your property will not now. The system has actually improved your situation. I know it doesn't look like it when you look out behind the dirt. But when you actually look at the design, it's improved, and I don't want to get into a debate with you about that, I mean, because that's just not, what you're talking about is not a criteria. It's not something the commission can rely on to make a decision. We want to be good neighbors. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Our engineer's here. He's happy to have a conversation with you. But I don't think this is the time or place for that right now.
You'll have a chance to speak again if you.
I've said what I need to say.
Okay, other questions? Great.
Is there any document that will give us some visibility to what's gonna go up behind our house?
Well, the next thing that would be constructed behind your house will probably be a residence when it goes in, and the building permit would be available to show you that, yes.
When?
When a building permit is applied for, the
Okay,
design of the home will be included in that building permit.
I'm just concerned with which way is it gonna face and what should I plant,
Okay,
honestly.
well, there will be a building permit that will show you all that stuff, and you can know exactly where to put the tree that blocks them out.
That's my question. Is it the builder's responsibility to address visibility issues to the existing neighborhood? For example, having to do with additional fencing or any sort of vegetation. Is that in the builder's responsibility?
In a word, no.
Okay, whose is it?
Well, it's the person who wants the privacy, and that could be either one. So it could be the person who buys the lot that wants to prevent you from looking at it. They may want to build something. Or it could be you who say, hey, I'm gonna build a shield that does this. There are landscaping requirements, those are all met. There are setback requirements that require houses to be a certain distance from one another and set back from the street. And set back from the rear yards, and rear yard setbacks are larger than side yard setbacks to create that kind of privacy that you're talking about. But in terms of sight lines and visibility, there aren't code provisions that apply directly to controlling sight on or off of a project.
So in Judy's question, to address Judy's question further, what's plans for what goes on that piece of property? And
Can I jump in here, Mark?
Sure.
And I apologize for interrupting the question. It's Tyler Yeoman Millette.
Hey, Tyler, thank you.
So the questions that folks have about specifically what types of what types of residences will be built on the property is not in front of the planning commission right now. The subdivision application is just about the layout. Oh, sorry. There's a train going by, so it might get a little loud. I apologize. So all of these specific questions about, what type of house is going to be there, what way it's going to face, what fencing, landscaping, etc. That's a down the line question that's at the next step of development that very likely would not be the applicant. It would likely be an individual who owns that lot. So these are all valid questions, but I just want to make sure that we're understanding the scope of what's before the planning commission, and kind of keeping questions narrowly tailored to that scope.
that was why I was asking who's on first, who's on second? You get the idea?
Yes.
Walt Gal, was that you speaking?
That was Tyler Yeoman. He's your city attorney. The city attorney. Oh, your city attorney.
Our city attorney. It's
Yes.
not Walt Gal.
So it's
Not
the
Walt.
city attorney,
What's his name?
Tyler.
Tyler Yeoman Millette. He works with Walt, and Walt is transferring or transitioning the business to Tyler.
Thank you. All right, so that's our city attorney speaking. Thank you. All right.
Are there any questions from the commission?
We have that. We'll do that later.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Reserve some opportunity for rebuttal. if
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We understand.
Testimony in favor of application. Angie, anyone online have a hand raised for?
I have one person with their hand raised, but it's been raised since the beginning, so I can't say if it's in favor or not.
Well, maybe they missed a public comment or something. Let's just see who that is. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hello.
On the phone, if you could identify yourself and address.
Hi, this is Patty Perrin, 215 North Maple Street. And I did have my hand raised initially, but I have a concern with the reapproval. And my concern is that this is obviously, well, yeah.
Patty, can I hold you up just a second? We're taking testimony in favor of application. We can get back to you with testimony against, okay?
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't me, but that's all do. All right, anybody else speaking for the application? All right, back to you, Patty. Testimony against application.
Okay, I'm back. So I am actually against the reapproval at this time because of the fact that it's well past the deadline and it's irrelevant if there's no changes to anything. And if in fact this is approved at this point, my concern is potentially this is going to set a precedent for any future builders to do the same or similar thing, and they can reference this as, well, you approved this, so why wouldn't you approve mine? I mean, there's guidelines for them to follow, and there's a reason for that. If they were procrastinating, developing, whatever the case may be, they should have taken their timeline into consideration for everything that they needed to do. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Patty. Any other testimony against application? Any neutral testimony? Keep it neutral. All right, rebuttal of in favor testimony, since there was none in favor, there won't be any rebuttal. Rebuttal of against testimony, that's for the developer.
Just briefly, the code contains a provision that authorizes an extension. And it's just that somehow the date in this instance never got logged. I think there was some turmoil and some turnover in the city. Obviously, it didn't get logged on the development side, but between the two, and had an extension been applied for and granted, which is standard procedure, we would not be here. So in many respects, what we're really doing here is a belated extension hearing. So that's just, I wanted to address the one comment about timing. This doesn't set a precedence. In fact, it reinforces the fact that the commission has the opportunity to review the conditions new. All the testimony is nothing has changed. There's nothing to review that has changed, and it was previously approved. It's been built out, which indicates compliance. So we believe the application warrants approval. With that, I'm happy to address any questions, which is I think what we're next to on your list, but I'm not sure.
You'll just rebuttal against, I think you've done that, and that's it for now.
Okay. So
Thank you.
questions?
Yeah, there's questions for us.
What was that, Sean?
He's staying up there this time for us to ask him more questions.
Yeah, we have more coming up now. Yeah, okay. Questions to applicant and public. I also have questions to staff. Tyler, would you agree with the applicant's characterization that this is something like an extension hearing?
Yes, I believe that is an accurate characterization. And to sort of piggyback a little bit on what Mark was talking about and missing the deadlines, the developer has been working with the city throughout this project. It's not as though they just kind of went rogue and built whatever they wanted to, wherever they wanted to, and then they're asking for us to kind of bless it afterwards, situation where they're asking for forgiveness instead of permission. They had the permission. They were working with the city. As we all know, the city has had some staffing turnovers, chronic understaffing, and the issue here and why it's not just an extension hearing, but is an actual reapplication is that deadline for approval was missed on both sides. But I just really want to emphasize that the developer was not engaging in any type of misconduct or trying to sneak anything by. It's been a fully transparent and cooperative process, just with the slight hiccup of the approval expired.
Okay, Tyler, thank you. I want to ask about what Sue put in front of me here. Sue has technical information made by the subdivider, and she's noticed development limitations gently in the topography, gently sloping east to west and north to south, maximum slope 7.5%, average slope 3%. Now, is that addressing what it was or what it's going to be?
I don't know what you're reading from.
It's in the, on page 2 or 7 of the technical information.
So
Now, the reason I asked, was that the way it was or the way it is now is because
this is part of the application. This was the pre-development conditions.
okay, what you found when you got there.
Yes.
And then from what I understood, it was decided that you needed to kind of reverse that slope to get the water going.
Correct.
Okay,
That was the design.
and, but was that changed in slope in the preliminary plat, or was it made by engineering after that?
Well, the plat had no slopes in it.
Okay,
And that was what we were talking about from the approval process perspective. The plat is a general layout that shows where the lot lines will fall.
Yeah.
Then the actual structure of the improvements within those lines is part of the design process that has to meet the city standards and be approved by the city engineer. So that design process was then undertaken, subject to the city standards by the developer's engineer.
Yeah.
Submitted to the city engineer for review and approval. The city engineer reviewed it and approved it. And in this instance, has also had the opportunity to see it completed and approve the completed construction, so that it's all within city standard and the design that was approved by the city for construction.
okay, and you are the engineer hired by the city, you represent AKS?
Correct.
And what's your name?
John Christensen.
John. So would you agree with that, what he just said, that the slope was one way, you then approved the design to change it, and that would meet city code, city standards, runoff, everything that needs to be done? That was something that you approved, is that right?
Correct.
And then from, once you approve that, where did it go farther for a final signature, or are you that? Is that signed off by city council or staff or anyone?
No, so we intake the plans, we review the plans for compliance with the city code and construction standards. And then we review it with Public Works for alignment. And then there's the approval from the city at that point.
Okay,
So Walt actually referenced what you're talking about, I believe, which is the city engineer sends a letter with the plat that says the design and construction meets all the applicable standards. And then it comes to you to confirm that the plat matches the preliminary plat or substantially complies with it.
okay.
I have a question.
Please.
Couple. First of all, how these folks over here, this 4-foot high thing, how wide is this in?
I believe it runs the bulk of the width of that end of the project. It's not yet, because we have to raise that side of the project. So it's about,
It's the width of the lot.
yeah, width of a lot.
Of that whole side of the subdivision?
Two lots are impacted.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is I am fairly familiar with driving, and when you approach a 3% grade, there on the other side of that grade at the bottom of it, for a truck, there is a safety ramp, because 3% grade gives you so much momentum going down. And so, and this says the maximum slope is 7.5.
That was the existing slope on the property.
7.5?
Yeah, and this is not, what we're talking about here is lot grading, not road grading.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that in my mind, I can envision what 3% versus 7.5% is. So if it's 4 foot high on that property, that's, what is that grade? Is that within that 7.5% or?
No, as we talked about, that 7.5% was what was there before work was done.
That's how nature
It was
makes.
7.5 slope to their property. It's now sloped away from their property.
And about
With the
what is that?
exception of that little bit at the end that was needed to raise the elevation to get it there. And so and generally in grading, the maximum slope without retention is 1-to-1, which is a 45% grade. But, and I don't know specifically, I think we heard the term from them was about 30% grade. So, and that's just dirt. It's like a backyard. It's not a road.
No, I know.
Okay.
You were trying to characterize the
Yeah.
slope in your mind.
Yeah. in my-
Can you speak to about what the slope is now going the other way? Is it it's pretty flat, and what is it? 2%. Yes, 2%. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, 2%. Okay.
That's
So
the
does
project
that,
engineer.
so does that satisfy you, Sue? It used to be 3% and now it's 2%.
So a 5% change in grade going the other way.
Huh?
The maximum was 7.5%. There was a place before they got their bulldozers out there that went,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit, because when it all averaged out, it averaged to 3, and now it's averaging to 2. Okay. All right.
And when you say the city, you don't mean city council, you mean city engineering.
That's correct.
Okay.
When I'm talking about engineering, because
Huh?
when I'm talking about engineering,
Yes.
because the order approving the subdivision and making the determination that all the criteria were met was made by the city council.
So he's the lawyer for the developers. This
Yeah, no, I
AKS
know.
is who
I know.
the city hires
I'm just
to take care of
I'm
us.
just
He's-
clarifying.
He's in our hen house.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I just wanted to point out Kurt, who was sitting here, is an engineer for the city of Hillsborough. So he's the one who has the common fence with, and I understand his concern.
got it. All right, and it's John.
Correct.
Would you speak to that, the integrity of that slope that the man here is concerned about? You know, what is it, and does clay hold that? And, you know, you're the guy that knows what dirt does. What, can you talk to us about that slope?
Yeah, so all the slopes on the site and all the earthwork was constructed as an engineered fill, and it was observed by a geotechnical engineer during installation. So it is stable.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for staff or applicants, public, anybody? All right, let's see where we're at. Unless waived by the, we might have some, just a question for you, unless waived by the applicant, the city will allow the applicant at least 7 days to submit final written arguments, but no new evidence, facts, documents, data, or testimony, in short, in support of application. The chairman should ask the applicant if he wants to waive the right to submit additional written arguments at this time.
Unless there's some issue on which you need more information, we're happy to waive that.
Okay,
We're prepared for a vote this evening and would welcome that.
great, thank you. All right, well, thank you. We're done there. Walt, would you, do you have comments on how this is going so far? Have we overlooked anything?
No, I think you've covered it. I wish I summarized it as well as Mr. Hoyt did with regard to the process. I think you have the information you need. I understand why this is a little unusual, but I think our city attorney also covered that as well. I suggest that you just simply vote on this straight up. We'll take care of the subdivision and the final plat. The conditions are set up that it establishes a deadline in which to record the document. It ensures that they're still complying with the conditions of approval from the city council decision. And also it ensures that the city engineer will make sure everything is done and in place before the plat goes before the planning commission chair.
All right, thank you. I'm not thinking we need testimony from anybody else. So now it's time to make a motion. It's time to close the hearing in one way or another. And we have three choices. The motion, so from one of you, I would like either a motion to close, motion to continue the hearing to a date at least 7 days from today, or a motion to keep the record open for at least 7 days for additional written arguments. So, anybody have a motion?
I make a motion to close the public hearing on the Park Meadows subdivision and final plat.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, let's go down roll call, Lynn.
Aye.
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 More aye.
Aye.
Very good. Now it's time for commission discussion. Anybody have anything to say? Questions? Deliberations? Okay. We have chance for additional questions to anyone who want to. Not hearing that. So now, would someone like to make a motion to approve the Park Meadows subdivision and the final plat? Let me make sure I read that just right. The Christine, let's see,
Off the agenda.
where am I? Thank you. Yes, to approve the Park Meadows subdivision reapplication and final plat determination. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Let's go down. Lynn, how do you vote?
Aye.
Hodgkins, aye.
Richardson, I.
Moore, aye.
Freiberger, aye.
Discussion, like, okay. Let's go. Discussion, then vote, and hopefully this says there's nothing more. Okay, so that public hearing is closed. And we voted, and we'll move to the next public hearing. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye. Thank you. This one is for the petition and property boundary adjustment. And so rule for public hearings, I won't read all that that I read before, but I will read the name of the application and the applicant. This is property petition boundary adjustment, file number 23-01. The applicant is Carol Smith and Eric Kittleson. Does anyone challenge the planning commission's jurisdiction to hear this application? Any member has a personal bias or conflict of interest, they shall declare it now. If any members of the commission has made a site visit, they shall state their impressions or observations. Walt, would you give us a staff report?
Yes, sir. Thank you again. The best way to explain this is, okay, rewind here. This is a two-part application. Applicants are requesting approval to adjust a property boundary between two platted lots. And then after the adjustment, one of the lots will be divided into three parcels. So the first part is a property boundary adjustment, and the second part is the actual partition. I'd like to make sure you do have this document, the partition lot line adjustment layout in front of you, and I could walk you through it probably a lot simpler than just stating it. Okay, on the north side of the map, you will see 2nd Street. On the south side on 3rd Street. Along 2nd Street, you will see 3 parcels, 1, 2, and 3. On parcel 3, there is a little rectangle, and it's identified with an arrow. It says 332 square feet transferred. The first part of the application is that 332 square feet would be transferred to the property on the south, which is lot number 2. So lot number 2, let me back up a little bit. Lot number 2 contains the existing home. Lot number 1, let's see. Block 1, block 2. Okay. Lot number 2 contains the existing home. Lot number 1 contains an existing garage. What would happen is that little portion of 332 square feet would be transferred from lot number 1 to lot number 2. The applicant provided information indicating these are separate and discrete platted lots and therefore may be developed independently. After that adjustment is made, the applicant then intends to divide lot number 1 to create 3 parcels. Parcel 1 is over 6,000. Parcel 2 is over 6,000. Finally, parcel 3 is over 6,000 square feet. On the layout, it certainly shows the dimensions and the depth for these individual parcels. Boundary adjustments or staff level type of reviews. However, in this case, since there's a partition involved, this is kicked up to the planning commission for review. With regard to the property boundary adjustment, the first item under consideration, the specific review criteria in section 11-16030. This adjustment cannot create a new parcel, and that's the case here. It's just adjusting the boundaries between the two. On the second item is that after the adjustments, all of the lots must comply, or the remaining properties must comply with the minimum lot size. The absolute minimum in this case for the zone is 6,000 square feet. After the adjustments, both platted lot 1 and platted lot 2 will comply. The third item is that it will not result in a setback violation, and that is certainly the case here. They maintain the setbacks for both structures. And finally, the fourth item is that the adjustment should not reorient or reconfigure the lots. Basically, everything's at right angles, and it will remain at right angles with the property paralleling each street. There is a process to record property boundary adjustments, and that's noted in the staff report. Now, with regard to the partition, the application has to meet the requirements for the particular zone. The minimum lot size within the zone, which is the RLC zone, is 6,000 square feet, has to be a 50-foot width at the building line and an average depth of at least 90 feet. There are no parcel slopes to worry about. And as noted, all three parcels exceed the 6,000 square foot requirement, as well as the width and depth requirements. There is a requirement that the depth not exceed the width by more than a factor of 3 to 1. Parcels 1 and 2 have a depth ratio of approximately 2 to 1, and the ratio for parcel 3 is 2.23 to 1. The parcels must maintain minimum access requirements. Again, the three parcels front on 2nd Street and have the minimum frontage requirement for the zone. The next item is that there are no flag lots to consider in this case. The item after that is the partitions generally do not favor through lots. This partition does not create a through lot. The next item is that the partition lot lines run basically at right angles to the street, and I think if you look at the layout, that's evident. Finally, there is a requirement to maintain utility easements. This is a very well detailed map, and it shows the location of every sewer, water line that can serve the properties. Finally, note that obviously based on this map, there's adequate facilities, and also based on the requirements, the layout complies with the minimum requirements. It's certainly a recommendation. I'm sorry, I'm just really trying to get over this cold here. The minimum recommendation, the staff's recommendation is certainly that this be approved. Normally, you would go through the property boundary adjustment and then come back for the partition in terms of a technical mapping. However, I think it's perfectly acceptable to include both items on the same plat because the new plat will have to be recorded, and just put them both on the same map, and that will meet the requirements of the code. So with that, it's definitely staff's recommendation that this adjustment and partition be approved. They either meet or exceed all the minimum requirements. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there, do you know if there's any requirements for lot size or for anything at all that has to do with a historical status on a house?
No, ma'am. The only thing that No, there's no lot size requirements for.
Okay,
historic structures.
I didn't know if there was anything that would reflect it at all on that.
Thank you. Interesting question. Thank you.
So will the applicant had an engineer prepare this map?
Right in the corner, I think,
Land surveyor, yeah.
Leyland McDonald and Associates would be the surveyor of record. And frankly, it was very helpful. Once it went through the whole thing, it was very helpful to see how it laid out.
That's what I heard you saying, that this is perhaps unusual in its clarity.
I have no complaints with that.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, any other questions? All right. Correspondence, Angie, on this?
No correspondence received.
Applicants' presentations.
I'm Eric Kittleson. My wife, Carol Smith, is here with me. We live at 363 Court Street Northeast in Salem. However, this property, this house and this land were owned by her great-great-grandfather. He built the house on it, and some member of their family has owned that house continuously until now. Carol just got it from a bunch of other people because it was divided all out. And so originally it was built by Thomas W. Perry in 1890. He was a cabinet maker and casket maker here in town. And Carol has a lot of other history in this town through R.P. Withicum, who was a woodworker. He had a shop in the back of the property. And is there any other names? Oh, the Withicum Tile Factory, which is way out. Is it Second Street? First Street. No longer exists, of course, but anyway, long history. Members of the family wanted to sell. She had a 10% ownership of the property. They wanted to sell the property, but it was in really poor shape. And Carol really wanted to save it because it was part of the family history. And it's right between a couple of historic houses, one on the end of beginning of Third Street. And then of course, the Beverly Cleary house on the end of Third Street. So we thought we'd have this one right in the middle. It's not on the historic register or anything, but we just wanted to save it. That was Carol's goal. And so one of the ways to save the house was to subdivide this large lot, which was basically a quarter of a block plus the area where the house is, and sell a couple of lots to finance the renovation of the house. So far, we've been doing just the outside before the weather sets in. We're just re-roofing right now. We've done painted and put new windows in. And but the house is so old that up until a few decades ago, it still had gas light tubing in there and things like that. It has rudimentary electrical in it, and it needs all new plumbing too. So we're going to be filing soon for electrical, plumbing, and a mechanical permit for new heating. And we just want to bring it back to life. We're not going to live in it. We're a little too old, and we have all of our million doctors in Salem close by. But we just love this community. And since we purchased the property earlier this year, working in Yamhill is so much better than working in Salem. It's incredible. Walk to City Hall, the woman in there knows everything that's going on. Our realtor is local, Donna Dempsey, and she's turned us on to local contractors. Just want to say we like working here, and we hope that you're okay with the partitioning so we can help to finance this project.
Well, did flattery get him anywhere? All right.
It's got some Moss and Gutterman gutters.
Say that again?
It's got some Moss and Gutterman gutters.
Oh yeah, we did use our, uh-oh.
Now we got a conflict of interest right there.
It's a small town.
All right. All right, applicant, testimony in favor of application. Were you done, sir? Were you done?
Yeah.
Were there any questions? Okay, any testimony in favor?
I have a question,
Um,
or that's not.
yeah, I guess we'll just back up and just go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to say, I love what you do. I run by there and I've really admired it. And Donna had let me know when it was maybe gonna be available. And I was like, interested. So I'm so pleased. It's like such a relief to see what you're doing. So thank you. And
I will give you a tour.
I would love to see, I'm so excited about it. And so what, I just am curious about the plan for it. If you're not gonna live in it, what are you?
We're gonna fix it up so that nobody tears it down
Excellent.
and invest enough money that they buy it.
Okay.
Not tear it down.
Got it.
So the plans, we don't want to change it. We're not
No.
changing it much at all. We're just, it just has a real, it's one bathroom. So we're going to, it's got many rooms in it. It's about 2,300 square feet. We're going to turn one of the bedrooms into, two of the bedrooms into bathrooms. It's going to end up with 2.5 baths. And the kitchen's going to get bigger.
Back to the original farmhouse kitchen.
Okay. Beautiful. Great.
Well, I'll take that as testimony in favor. The gas being in the eye. Yeah. Okay, just any testimony against? Yes, would you state your name and maybe come on up here and state your name and address?
So I'm Jeremy Kent. I live at 215 West 3rd Street, and let me start by saying that the map's really helpful. I mean, that was my first thing, is to come to the meeting to get a better understanding of what was taking place. The letter, it was hard to draw a picture in my head. So again, the map is really helpful. It's nice to look at it. I mean, the only reason I'm opposed to this is, you know, moved to Yamhill 23 years ago, lived here almost half my life. Part of the reason people move here is for a small town feel. You know, it's nice to, or I want to keep it that way, small town, you know. My first impression when reading the letter, it looks like, you know, there's going to be a bunch of houses stacked on top of each other, which is, you know, you want that, you can move to the big city for that. So again, looking at the map, it's a little better in my mind, but just seems like more of a money grab here than anything. So anyways, that's all I gotta say.
All right, thank you. Here we go.
I get one question though. Is there any codes for elevation changes like these people are going through, and like for these people when they go to build a house? Can they bring in dirt and raise the elevation of that lot?
Well, I think from what I heard tonight, not an expert, but the city engineer will look at applications and make sure that it meets code. Now, I can't quote you what the code is on what people can and can't do, but it will meet code. And if it meets code, it meets code.
No, I know, but is there a code for elevation changes?
So as a civil engineer in my previous life, before I became a computer guy, there are codes about drainage.
Yeah.
And so they can do some sloping, but it's to accomplish the drainage. They can't do anything that'll bring moisture.
Flood your neighbor.
Right, flood your neighbor. But privacy wise, like what their concern was, there's nothing you can do about it.
No, I'm talking more or less drainage.
Yeah, so there are standards around drainage, but there aren't standards about elevation. But if you start raising elevation like that, you're gonna start creating drainage issues potentially. Now, this was engineered to slope a certain way, but
It's too bad they couldn't put some kind of drain in there to.
well, so I actually live in the new subdivision, the other new subdivision, and they've had drainage issues over there, so I was really interested in listening to all this. Our drainage issues though are the lots were designed to basically drain to the front of the lot. And then a whole bunch of people have water in their basements now because they didn't do the grading right. So I'm one of the lucky ones.
Whole land doesn't drain right.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who have that issue. So I was really curious when he was concerned about drainage, but in this situation, I think they addressed it.
So that might be a no basement subdivision.
Sean, I want to congratulate you. As you were speaking, I saw Walt nodding, so
Oh, about the drainage stuff? Yeah.
All right, very good. All right, next, neutral testimony. Rebuttal of in favor. Who gives rebuttal of in favor? Anybody? Rebuttal of in favor, I mean, the applicant's not gonna do it. Okay, that's, well, who rebuts in favor testimony? Can anybody do that?
Rebuttal is left to the applicant. I'm not sure whether, I've never heard of an applicant be angry at someone supporting them.
Yeah, okay, I'm confused. All right, we'll not solve that tonight. Rebuttal of against. Any rebuttal of against testimony? Okay. Commission questions to applicant and public. Any questions?
I guess I'll just make a statement. The reason I was asking about the historical is because you said on your application, does the partitioning affect any parcel or buildings with historical significance? And even though it's not listed on the historical listing, it's still of historical significance.
Well, yeah, it is to us too.
Well, it is to me too.
I didn't know if it was, if that was a technical definition.
No, it definitely is. Anything that's over 50 years.
Oh,
but
so
it-
in
but-
Annville, that's a historic.
Well, no, that's state. That's national, actually.
Oh,
That's
how you-
national.
Yeah, it has to be over 50 years to get on the register.
That's right.
Yeah.
And speaking from myself, my family bought the Beverly Cleary house in 1975. And my daughter and her husband lived there. And my granddaughter and her husband, one of my granddaughters, owns the Laughlin house. So we're very interested in doing everything we can to bring historical, and then I work with the Economics Development Committee. And the city is interested in the historic significance of the downtown. And we are of the other significant buildings in this town. And even though you don't have to sign on to any of the information that is available, if you're trying to get historical significance for your property or your house or your building or whatever, it like tax breaks or anything like that, it will help the whole city to be able to develop the historical homes or buildings in this town. So I'm very delighted about what you guys are doing.
We have restored three or four historic buildings that we put on the National Register in Salem, but those were commercial buildings. We didn't feel like we needed to go through that for this residential, but we like old stuff. We really do.
We're gonna be doing the renovation based on the historic standards we've done on our other buildings, historic buildings.
And we gave a tour to your son-in-law already when he came by to bid the job.
So I would encourage you, it sounded like you had a whole bunch of history. And I'd encourage you to either talk to the downtown or the Economic
Please.
Association people and get that history documented with them. And then and also provide it to the people that buy your home when you sell it. Because it might be something that the economic group might want to look into in the future. And then we have that record. Because right now, I think there's a lot of buildings in town, we probably don't know the record. I know that there was the one by the Mexican food place that somebody on the internet they want to renovate it, trying to get history, and they're asking questions, trying to find out what the history is of that building. Well, in this case, we actually know some history, so we should
Yeah, we would
try
be
to capture
delighted to
that.
have it.
So,
Great, if you would share it. Thank you.
I'd like to speak to the concern about us lots and building. And to us as a council. A few years ago, when John Morgan was our city, what are you all? Planner. We changed the zoning in the town to allow 6,000 square foot lots. And that was to reduce the pressure on farmland. That we were purposely increasing the density possibility in the town because that is a state requirement that we have buildable land for 20 years. And we're going to be looking at increasing the urban growth boundary to do that. However, part of that is making sure that you've done everything you can to have a reasonable density within the town. And that was the kind of the seemed to be the right lot size to increase that density. So those things are at odds with, you know, your comments about you can go to the big city for that and that sort of thing, but that's what's happening in cities now. So it's just kind of part of the plan for land use in general. All right.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
In addressing that, I don't want houses on it either.
We wanted it to be a park.
Well, yeah, if the
But
city
no,
of
the
Yamhill
city-
wanted to buy it as a pocket park, we'd be happy to sell it to you.
But we talked to someone about that. We didn't talk to people high up, but we got the impression that there wasn't
Interest?
interest or there wouldn't be money to turn that into a park.
Okay.
But it just is a perfect little neighborhood
Maybe you
pocket
do a
park.
fundraising thing, raise the money.
All right, so that was commission questions to applicant and public. Final staff comments.
I would, as a fellow resident of Salem, I would like to concur with the applicant's assessment of what I think they've certainly met all the requirements, if not exceeded them. Certainly complies with the code requirements and certainly recommend approval subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you. Applicant, would you like to waive the right to submit additional written arguments at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion to close the hearing?
I move to close the hearing.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, any discussion? Any questions, additional questions? Would someone like to make a motion to approve or deny the partition and lot line adjustment?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lynn, let's go down the line. How do you vote?
Carl, I. Hodgkins, aye.
Richardson, aye.
More aye.
Freidengerer.
Who seconded? I wasn't looking up.
Lynn.
Okay.
All right, back to the agenda. Housing grant. Update at meeting.
Okay, nothing really to add at this point, just to make sure everyone is aware. I did apply for a housing grant to look at a housing needs analysis and potentially a buildable lands inventory. We were originally approved, but got put on the back burner because they were going through some additional funding. Turns out that we will have a complete analysis of our housing, beginning with a comprehensive plan document, go all the way through our development code, and also a buildable lands inventory, which will benefit eventual expansion of the urban growth boundary. I applied for 7 and the budget for the project is 47,000. So thank you, DLCD, and I have no complaints about that. We will likely have outside consultant do the work, which I think works very well. There's a lot of moving parts in this project, and I think someone who has expertise in this will do an outstanding job for the city. So otherwise, I'm just waiting for DLCD to organize a meeting. With my years of experience here working with the local governments in the state, you can forget about doing anything during the holidays. So it's just kind of the way it works with the state government. So I anticipate sometime in January, things will start kicking off. Moving to the next one, the technical assistance grant. I submitted an application to look at the downtown central business district, C3 zone, lighting, signage, the whole sort of, let's look at our downtown kind of review to maybe make potential code amendments. I have not heard back from DLCD. I haven't heard anything whether or not we've been awarded or rejected. So again, right now, I'm just waiting for some feedback from the state. So that's kind of where we are on that one. We were originally looking at going ahead and, excuse me, we're originally going ahead to look at chapters 10, 04, 08, and 12 this evening. However, Ken Moore and I discussed the fact that a lot of our work may go out the window because if we already have one grant, but if we get the other grant, we may be just duplicating work. And so it just didn't make sense to us to go ahead and spend the taxpayer money twice, if you will. So we would look at it one way and then they come in and look at it a different way. So I think it just would behoove us to just step back from the development code aspect of it and focus in on our land division requirements. One of the issues that I could see right off the top is, for example, the subdivision. Most cities allow up to 2 years to record a plat. Had that been the case here, we wouldn't have had this meeting. We probably had a meeting. No, yes, we would have. We would have only looked at the final plat. So, I mean, these sort of things I think need to be changed. I guess I would like to beg a bit of an indulgence with the Planning Commission. I'm really working on or trying to get rid of this cold or flu. And if we can kind of move some of these items to next month, I would really appreciate it. I'm just kind of melting on my chair. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna get you off here in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
Can we maybe outline some sections of Title 11 to look at next month?
Sure, hold on. Let me just pull up the document. Yamhill. Building City Code. Yeah, there's a lot we can do in 11 that won't interfere with anything. I think we should start with, let's do 1104 and 1108. And that covers kind of the introductory provisions and subdivision and PUD. After that, we can work on partitions and property boundary, and then finally design and street standards. Again, I think looking at this particular title is a little bit easier because no matter what happens downtown or with housing or whatnot, this is a basic fundamentally land divisions is a process. So I think this would be, the timing would be excellent. And again, today was a very good example where our code is 1 year to record. In most every place I've ever worked, it's 2 years with a 1 year extension. So there is simple ways of doing it. Yes, I have a number of things that I think we could look at, and I'd really like to kind of focus on this. And I think this will give us a good head start, if you will, to discuss the code.
Okay, so 1104, 1108, that's 6 pages. It skips from 4 to 8. So, and that's available on the website.
Right.
Next month?
Come again?
Next month?
Yeah.
In fact, since we're only talking a handful of pages, why don't you have a gander at the partition section? And if we can get to that, great. If we can't, that's fine too. Okay?
Is that the next section?
Next one, yes, sir.
That would be 1116.
12.
Right.
I think 12.
Oh, my document doesn't have it, unless it's real short. So I'm so glad I said that because
Yeah,
there it is. It's hiding. It's only 2 pages.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It should, I think we should get through most of that.
All right, 4, 8, and 12.
4, 8, and 12, yes, sir.
Now, the next thing on the agenda is the downtown building moratorium. Walt wrote me an email that said, you can't do that. What would you like to talk to what we can and can't do about holding off on development before we get stuff in place?
Actually, you really don't have a lot of options. Moratoriums only apply to capacity issues. The city doesn't have enough water, can't process sewer. Everything else is, I'm just trying to recall I think it was the Petaluma case in 1973, but that goes back. They tried to stop development in the city by basically limiting the number of single-family building permits. And that went to the Supreme Court and they said, no, you can't, because we have a right of movement in this country. And so you just can't put up a wall and say you can't move to town and build a house. And the same thing with whatever else. If we have a set of standards, and if someone comes in with an application, we are duty bound to go ahead and actually process that application. We have no alternative to do so. So I can't give you any encouraging thoughts on this one. I will say this though, if we do not get the grant for the downtown, I think it would be worth our time to dive into that whole thing immediately, so we can at least address that issue. But no, you are compelled to accept the application and process it. And as long as it meets the requirements, you're also compelled to approve it.
All right, so Jenny, that suggestion came from Phil, and maybe you need to kick that back to him and see if he knows something different, or do you know something different?
No, I'll ask.
Okay.
And can I ask?
Yes, sure.
Should I make myself official? So again, Jenny Morrison with the Economic Development Committee. And our concern then is, here, more official. Our concern, our committee's concern is that if we wait on the grant, whether we have the grant or don't have the grant, there is this tremendous sense of urgency to not be behind the 8 ball if we wait till next month and then it's the new, then it's the new year and then we're still waiting. If we don't have the grant, we have the low hanging fruit, that the urgent things that need to be addressed, so we can at least have some capability of
saying no.
Saying no.
Yes.
Or, and so I would just.
What is the verbiage? I'm not remembering. That we're always using.
The formula business. Restriction. And so I totally
So we don't get a
understand.
Dollar General. There has been 2 people approached about buying, including one of the historical houses,
Yeah, the urgency is clear.
so that we don't get a Dollar General in this
I
town.
agree.
So can I ask a question about the budget then? And I appreciate wanting to save taxpayer dollars and all of that. My question is then, what do you guys as the planning commission, are you guys feeling like you want to hold off until money is for sure earmarked for this? Because if it's not earmarked and we don't get the grant, then.
Let me ask Walt a question around this, but first I want to ask you, what would be your number one concern?
The formula business.
Okay.
Restrictions, I
So-
believe, plus the other, kind of, we worked on a list.
Yes.
Of kind of prioritizing.
I think we need to prioritize with, budget concerns. If we do anything before we know about the grant, we want it to be our number one thing. We want to focus on that, and that would be it.
Yes.
Okay, so, well, do you see a middle ground of getting started on that before we get the grant?
Actually, I don't think, once you mention get the low hanging fruit and just focus on one thing, I think that's probably doable. And the reason I say that is that it really doesn't get into all the other stuff and what else should we do. We're focusing on one particular item. And I think that could be very doable. I will hit the planners network and start asking around for any recommendations. And we could, let's put that on our agenda for next month if that works. Maybe some draft language. How's that?
Yeah, it's great, Sean.
So when you say recommendations, you mean regarding the formula
Business, right. Just
Okay.
focus on that. And
Yeah.
I think that is probably the number one concern. Again, my issue, just recognizing I have to be cognizant of everyone's budget and time. I just don't want to start duplicating efforts. But I think this formula business is unique and separate from the downtown on a certain level. And so I think we could certainly work on that. Let me come back next month with some language. How's that?
Okay, and Walt, would you like me to just run that by the mayor? Would that make you feel more comfortable, or are you good enough without her second blessing?
I would be very, make sure the mayor is aware. How's that?
Okay, yeah, I will make sure she's aware. If I don't get back to you, it's because she was fine.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Jenny, how we doing?
Thank you.
Thank you. You got something done here tonight.
There we go.
Get on it.
So can I ask for just like a little more context on that?
Yeah, you're curious what's that about?
Yeah.
Maybe Jenny's best to speak to that.
Sure, yes, and so planning the.
Just a minute, Jenny. Can we set the next meeting and get
Yes,
Walt
let
in
Walt-
bed?
And Mom, do you need some soup?
Yeah. All right, let's look at
Pop drops.
let's look at our next, the scheduled meeting and make sure that that's gonna work, and hopefully it does, because we all are keeping those Mondays open. And that is the 18th of December. Yes? Yes, well,
That's what I have.
okay, with that, we'll let you go, Walt.
Thank you very much. I want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and everyone take care.
All right, I can't wait for a Merry Christmas from you.
Okay, that's gonna have, oh, I got it.
Okay.
Wear the hat.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right, please, Jenny, go ahead and
Okay,
tell us about
now I'm
that.
trying to find my notes so I can speak coherently. Okay, so, formula business restriction, is a. Let me just get my notes. Get the wrong thing here.
I'm gonna adjourn in case anybody just
Okay, yeah,
wants to
yeah,
go.
okay.
All right, we're adjourned.